All right, everybody, the WEBGRAVE weapons tier list. Here it is. So, usual disclaimer that I did for the last tier list. What makes this tier list a little different than ones you've seen before is probably that this tier list is focused on endgame content specifically, and specifically the hardest content in the game. So, not your normal elites or trash mobs. This is focused on bosses. This is focused on vaults, especially for higher level characters. So these can act sort of as a high watermark for where you're heading in terms of making your builds, but might not necessarily apply to you if you're still leveling and struggling with mid and early game content. So those are that's the disclaimer. Another disclaimer I'd like to say is that I have a specific play style that I enjoy, and my tier list will reflect that. But I'm going to be try to be objective, and I follow other creators. I follow friends who play this game. I see a lot of different play styles, so I will try to build that into this as well. So I'd also like to note that many of the weapons are useful in different situations. This game is very well balanced, I think, compared to a lot of single player games. So I might put something in D tier and you say, hey, wait a second, that's my favorite gun. I've destroyed all the content of the game just with that gun. And that makes sense because D tier, even in this list, is still like quite good and usable. The point of this tier list is to help you pick guns that will be the best at beating the hardest content in the game, not guns that you can beat the hardest content of the game, if that sort of makes sense. So, if your favorite gun goes in the D tier, just recognize I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying it's not fun. I'm just saying it struggles with some of the harder content, even though you can make it work with good play. And that's what I love about this game. So with that, let's start at the beginning. Speaking of putting things in the lowest tier, All-Seeing Eye. I'm so sorry, All-Seeing Eye. I really used to love this weapon. So bolt action rifle, small magazine, has a little bit of extra single target damage coming from its Mysterium, but it really is more of an AoE weapon because of the like rot explosion thing. And I think you could argue at this point this weapon is even worse than it was because one, rot used to be really hard to come by, and now they've added a lot of ways to get rot through your different builds. And two, enemies are tankier now because you can go all the way up to Gnosis 6. The endgame content, you are fighting really tanky, elite, and ascended big enemies. And something that helps you get a little rot around on lots of things is not really that useful. Again, spells are the way to deal with trash mobs in this game at the high level. So All-Seeing Eye, it's cool, but it has too small a magazine. It can have ammo problems because it takes so many rounds to kill an enemy, and the AoE isn't damaging enough to make it kill lots of larger enemies. So sorry, ASC lovers. I know you're out there. I see you, but this one just isn't it. All right, the Angelus. So this gun is one of those ones that, for me, it's difficult to be objective about because it supports a playstyle that I don't use as much. But from what I've seen, this gun has gotten better. Not that it's been buffed necessarily, but that the playstyle that it supports is more important. So with the higher Gnosis levels and with the reduced health and healing options from what it was before, playing defensively is now stronger than it was. Before, you could run in with your shotgun, you could slide around, you could destroy everything with your echo or whatever, and face tank a ton of damage with Hen's Bane and like triple the health of a normal character. The devs figured out it was very overpowered. But now that isn't really an option. You can kind of get partially there with Bead, with the Rosary. But now defensive stuff like this is stronger, and you have to take fights a little bit slower and more carefully. So for that reason, I'm going to put this in the B tier. That's a pretty high tier. This thing helps you destroy bosses. I think it's one of the best options for blowing up the soul sigils, those ones that you dash stun through. And it has pretty good ammo economy, especially if you're using the shield on it. It's a solid weapon, and it supports a playstyle that I think got a lot better. So that's why it's going there. Next is the Basilisk. So the Basilisk is a weapon I thought was extremely good. It got rated very highly in the last tier list. And mainly because at the level of the enemies you were fighting with the Basilisk before, so when it went up to a lower Gnosis, it had just such a high DPS with lots of precision, fast reload, big magazine, fire element, like big damage. You could just chew through a whole group of enemies so fast with it. But now the health of enemies is getting too high. You can't just 1 and 2 shot a couple of those medium tier enemies. The cannoneer guys, you got to shoot them in the head like 6 times. And suddenly that makes the weapon start to have a really bad ammo economy, because you're fighting a bunch of these elite guys, these elite cannoneers, elite, executioners. You start to run out of ammo. You start to get like way more threatened, since there are other weapons that have better range than this. You need to get in a little more than those other weapons. And it just won't kill things fast enough for you to be safe. So what used to be kind of a safer high ammo weapon, I think with these new Gnosis levels and the reduced health and stuff, is now just a little on the lagging end. It feels weaker than other options. So it's going to drop. This is probably the one that might drop the most in this tier list. We'll see. But I think I had it way up at A, I believe. I'm going to put it in C. I think it really has fallen off due to this higher level of enemy health and the lower level or lower health of the character. Okay, Cricket. So I would say this is the one that I get the most messages about being in the wrong tier. I put it a little bit lower than I think people expected, and so I would like to talk about it a little bit. So Cricket, I think the reason people think it's so powerful and why I love it so much is because on medium level content, you can kill 3 nodes in 40 seconds. You can instantly reload, you're dashing between enemies, your damage is scaling off the charts, and you start one-clipping even elites when they're mixed in with smaller mobs. This weapon can grind through huge numbers of enemies so fast with no pause at all, except maybe to let your stamina recharge. But that all sounds amazing. That sounds like an S tier weapon, right? But the downside of the Cricket is it needs to get the ball rolling. So if you're on the highest Gnosis, at doing some of the hardest content, which is what this tier list is aimed at, you'll notice the Cricket isn't one-hitting, it's not one-clipping enemies. And if you can't kill them in one magazine, then you can't get the ball rolling. You can't get the damage scaling or the instant reloads, and it just becomes a very mid to low damage weapon with like no Mysteriums. Mysteriums rely on those kills. So when you're fighting like a bunch of elite cannoneers, you're not going to get the ball rolling and it won't kill them. And then the other reason I'd put it a little lower than other options on this tier list is because it struggles with bosses. It basically is a gun with like no Mysteriums against bosses, so it's worse than its counterparts. Again, this doesn't mean it's a bad weapon or that's not a fun weapon. I think it's up. It's probably top 3 weapons for me in the game in terms of how much fun it is and how much I've used it. It's amazing. And it gives you your spells back faster and all that stuff. So you're just like obliterating huge groups of enemies. But against the hardest content, tons of elites, ascended, and bosses and vaults, this is not the weapon you want to bring with you. And I think that aggressive playstyle it supports also got worse because of the nerfs to the player's health at high levels and the number of healing pots you get. So very controversial. I hate to do it, but I did it to my friend the Basilisk as well. The Cricket is going to go in C tier again against the hardest content of the game. Duelist. This is like weirdly, so it's a very sort of normal weapon in Witchfire. It's good. It feels almost like the assault rifle of Witchfire. It feels very solid and kind of straightforward in a lot of ways. And I like it a lot. I think it has some cool mechanics. It does have a lot of trouble with just the DPS challenge. So 2 main problems with it. So one, it feels clunky to use. It's hard to get into this rhythm with it when you start a duel, you activate its ability, and then your gun reloads, so you actually can't keep shooting them, and then you kill enemies, and uh-oh, your thing ran out, and you didn't get a kill because you were shooting from too long range. Now you need to kill an enemy and then get another duel. It just feels like when it's rolling, it's fun, and you're running through enemies with your instant reload fire pistol. But if that doesn't happen, this weapon just feels like really clunky. I think they might need to get rid of the auto reload as soon as you hit the duel. It just feels like, oh, you need to sit here for a second after you did this awesome thing. And then the getting a kill to sort of rearm the Mysterium, I think that also just feels clunky against stronger enemies, like at the higher Gnosis. Sometimes it's like, oh, I need to kill a whole elite with this weapon before I can get it activated again. That's going to be pretty hard. Maybe it should activate in headshots, maybe something else, but the weapon feels a little bit weak. It has a good ammo economy. Feels a little bit weak. It feels a little bit clunky, but it's still solid. I'd put it right along with Cricket. Also struggles bosses because you need to get that kill to activate its Mysteriums. It's kind of a no Mysterium weapon against bosses, and that means it's around C tier. Echo. So this weapon is one of the highest DPS weapons in the game. When you activate everything on it, you use like Meteor Ring and you're sliding. You can kill the bosses so fast. It is, for me, I've used it to get some of my fastest kills ever. But of course, I think the playstyle, again, that it supports is one that got nerfed. So this like up close and personal, in your face playstyle, I think just has been nerfed across the board, both because of enemy healths and the nerfs to player healths, as I've said before. So I think shotguns in general got a little bit worse. I think I had this one all the way up in S tier because it is the boss killer. It obliterates most of the bosses in the game. Except this new one, it's not as good against because the Spider Queen hangs, spoilers, Spider Queen hangs on the ceiling. You can't just insta-kill it with the Echo. So that boss is worse. It's still very good against many of the other bosses, but I think if you're going around mobbing with it, killing elites, ascended, and trash mobs, you'll have a lot more trouble because of the nerfs to Henbane, player health, and healing pots. It's still great. It still is the best option for much of the hardest difficulty enemies in the game, and for that I'll put it in A, but it doesn't quite reach S tier. Frostbite is a great gun, one of my favorite guns. So I love the bolt action rifles. This one feels a little snappier. It's got a pretty good magazine. Its Mysteriums are strong. It has very good ammo economy, and with certain prophecy setups, this gun can just delete a boss with like 3 bullets and a little bit of juggling the boss around and freezing it over and over again. This thing is a monster. It's great at long range. It's pretty good at medium range. There isn't a lot that it struggles against. The only thing you could say it has trouble with is like a lot of smaller mobs or like medium health mobs that don't get killed by it in one shot. But those mobs you're already probably killing with your spells or with a closer range weapon. This weapon can trivialize several bosses in the game with the right setups. And it's great against the elite and ascended big tanky enemies. I think it maybe is a little bit lower DPS than you would hope if you're not using the reload mechanic correctly. But it is just such a versatile weapon in that it can kill bosses instantly and helps you mob so well. This is one that I would really consider putting in S tier. I think the only thing holding it back is you do have to get a little bit lucky to get the boss killing setup on it. Just, deleting a certain amount of max HP from a boss every time they freeze and getting the freeze bullet going. If you don't get that, it's not that great against bosses. It's a pretty good chance you get it, but it's not guaranteed. And I like things that are guaranteed. So that's the only thing holding it back from S from me. It's great against big tanky enemies and mid-sized enemies, and usually, often, against bosses, but not always. So for that, I think it should be by its friend Echo in A tier. Hailstorm. I'm so sorry, Hailstorm. I think Hailstorm is bad enough that it will probably get reworked at some point. There are now just better options than the Hailstorm for that big, chunky sniper effect. It is mostly strictly worse than one of the other options that we'll talk about later. But I think the devs are aware of it, and I think this weapon will get changed or buffed in some major way. Right now, it has enormous ammo problems. And then the freeze effect isn't that important. It's sort of counterintuitive because the freeze effect it's good on the big enemies, but you're hoping to one-shot them or two-shot them. So maybe you shoot them and they freeze, and then you shoot them again and they die. Maybe. Maybe it freezes the enemies around them, but you don't want to shoot smaller enemies with it. This gun just is sort of a bunch of contradictions, and it has bad ammo economy, great damage, great range, slow firing, low magazine. I would say it's better than the All-Seeing Eye, but it struggles against bosses, and you really can't use it for that much of the game because of the ammo issues. I think this weapon needs a rework, and I think it'll get one too. So I'm excited to see where that goes. Hangfire. Hangfire got some buffs. Got a damage buff, and I think they've fixed some of the finicky issues with it. Just it had a lot of sort of bugginess around the damage amounts and AoEs and stuff. I think this gun got a lot better. So I think strong AoE is stronger now because there are a bunch of really high health enemies, and if you plug each one with a Hangfire shot, then you do a ton of damage. And the ammo economy on it got buffed a while ago, is crazy. You can shoot this thing forever. You can also use it to blow up spider eggs in large numbers, by the way, which I highly recommend. The only thing it struggles with is bosses. So it does okay damage. It's not like it's bad. But if you want to kill like a really tanky enemy, it just doesn't do that much single target damage. I'd say it's fantastic for killing like the hardest nodes a bunch of elites and ascended coming out all at once, maybe from multiple nodes. It's one of the best at doing that. But because it struggles so much with single targets, single target bosses, doesn't really struggle with single target elites. It does a lot of damage, but single target bosses, this is not the weapon you want to use for that. Part of me wants to put it in C tier because it struggles so much with bosses, but I think the buffs to it really put it over this threshold where it's annihilating a lot of the hardest enemies in the game before you get to the boss. And so for that reason, I'll put it up there in B tier. And it's not terrible against the boss, and the fire effect is useful. Great weapon, so much fun. It's been one of my favorite weapons since the beginning. But there it is, B tier for Hangfire. So this one is somewhat controversial, but for me, with the most recent changes, I think this will be a pretty apparent winner here. So Hunger. Hunger has gotten some changes. I think the playstyle around Hunger has gotten better. I think the weapon is one of the best weapons in the game. It's one of the first ones you get to. So what is so great about Hunger? First of all, just the stacking damage mechanic is really strong. So if you're just talking Mysteriums, getting headshots, getting crits, whatever, the stacking damage mechanic is really good. It comes with freeze, which is a great element to have against bigger enemies like bosses. But the real reason that Hunger is so good is because it synergizes really, really, really well with a lot of Arcana. And you can build your Arcana list in such a way that this weapon is consistently unbelievably powerful against bosses. Like, not even letting bosses attack. Basically every time you do a run. It has unbelievable stun damage with the stacking damage and freeze. This thing is, it won't kill a boss as fast as Echo, maybe, but you can, if you shoot the boss in the head a few times and you have some bullets stored up, the fight's over. You don't even need to really do much after that. You just keep instantly stunning the boss, knocking them over, doing huge stacking damage. And the better you do in the fight, the better you do. It stacks the damage. If you knock an enemy over and they're stunned, you get to shoot them in the head for free, and it makes the gun even better. I think the only thing that sort of detracts from this gun is it can have a little bit of trouble with ammo economy. It's pretty good, but it could be better. And then if you aren't interested in building crits, or you struggle to get headshots consistently, the gun is weak. But since this tier list is focused more on higher level play, and I think players who try to get those crit builds or go for those headshots, I think it's clear that this weapon is not only an S tier, it's maybe the best weapon in the game currently. That's a strong claim, but I believe that it's just so good. Okay, so next is Hypnosis. There's a lot of people who love this gun, me included. It was probably one of the first guns I focused on getting to Mysterium 3 when I got it, just because I love the mechanic. It seems like just free damage with the timing the fire rate to be just right, and then the lightning element works really well on it and seems to lightning the one you shoot as well. Really, the damage becomes crazy at super high ranges. I think there are a lot of people who would immediately put this in S tier. And I see why. The ammo economy is great. The damage is really great. The range is great. It struggles with some closer range stuff, but a lot of that stuff you can kind of run away from or put down spells and deal with it. But there are a few things that I'm going to argue here that I think a lot of people would agree with. So, Hypnosis struggles against things that are closer to you. Velmorn is generally a closer range map. This also includes things like spiders and stuff who come around corners. You need to shoot them at when they appear and when they're vulnerable, not necessarily when you decide, but kind of when they decide, when they run up on you. A lot of enemies now jump at you, executioners and the sword masters. There were some before, and the townswomen. All of these enemies get on you, and that makes this weapon worse. I've done a bunch of runs with it since the change, since the WEBGRAVE update. And in Velmorn especially, it feels worse to use than it did. The enemies in Velmorn seem to be like the counter to Hypnosis players. I love the weapon, and in Iron Gate, it can really carry you through pretty much everything except the vault. It struggles in the vault. It does okay against bosses. It's hard to consistently hit those shots and dodge all the boss's attacks unless you're already just really good and could do that with whatever weapon. I think it's better than most of the weapons in the game, and kind of does things, it gets those damage numbers so easily that it has to be rated really highly here, but struggles against a lot of the new content. The new content is very good against people who use Hypnosis. And it struggles a little bit against some of the bosses who get up on you, or the Spider Queen who spawns multiple enemies. For that reason, I'm only going to put it in A. I know a lot of people want it in S tier, but this is where it belongs. If you take all the content into account, this is where Hypnosis should be. Judgement. Judgment's one of the newest weapons, not the newest, but strong shotgun. And I love a weapon that brings more than one element to the table. So decay and freeze. A reason I like having more than one element is just, if you don't know, elements stack in powerful ways. They're not just independent of each other. So lightning plus fire does better lightning damage, or does like fire, it ticks with the fire, and rot and lightning, it spreads. So having more elements available means you're actually more free to pick other things in your kit, because you don't need a kit that has 4 elements if one of your weapons already has 2. You can have a kit that just like has 1 other element on your relics or whatever. So I love that about it. I love that it's versatile in that you can shoot it somewhat quickly, or you can charge it up. I love that it's versatile in that it can fire quite long range. The ammo economy on it is, I'd say, mediocre. And the other thing I'd say about it is, as I said before, I think shotguns just generally got worse in the most recent patch because of this sort of up close and personal playstyle being nerfed in general. It's okay against bosses. What stops it from being a really high tier for me is it doesn't have like a huge amount of synergy besides its elements. So Hunger has the stacking crit mechanic, Echo with Meteor Ring, and some of the Arcana, the sliding gives you extra damage and reload. It's all really good, and it stacks and stacks and stacks. Judgment is solid, and it will get you through a lot of hard fights, and it's good in different situations. I love that it brings multiple elements to the table, but it doesn't have that layer of synergy that brings it up to the other level, to a higher level with some of these other weapons. For a weapon to be S tier, it has to be good against like everything, like big enemies, medium-sized enemies. It has to stack with Arcana. Like that's the kind of weapons that are up there. Judgment, I think, it can still feel a little clunky, but it is a solid weapon. It's very good. And I think people are negative about it because when it came out, it felt very clunky and very weak. But it's gotten a bunch of buffs since then. So if you haven't tried it, really do. The stamina cost is super low on it. It's pretty fast firing if you want it to be, and it does a ton of damage with multiple elements. You really got to try this thing out again. I'm going to put it at the top of B tier. I think it's very good, but it won't hard carry you through a boss encounter or a whole map. It doesn't have the ammo for that. Koschei. So Koschei is one of the newest weapons from WEBGRAVE you get from the Bone quest. It's the burst fire assault rifle of Witchfire in the most creepy, crazy way ever. I love the theming of this gun. It's wicked and wild, and it feels so different. But so it's a great gun. So the benefits of this weapon are you never really need to reload. It sort of reloads in between your shots automatically. It does just really solid damage at a solid range. And then when you get a bunch of kills, you can do the big blast of decay. It does a bunch of damage, spreads decay all over the place. It's strong. It does drain your stamina though. So the downsides of this weapon are because so many enemies have so much high health on Gnosis, on the highest Gnosis, you can often run out of ammo shooting them, and then you need to wait a long time for it to reload. If you're just laying into the skulls around a calamity, for example, normally with other weapons you could just blast through a couple, reload, blast through a couple more. This weapon is much more hit and run than that. It can't deal with sustained fire, and since there are so many high health enemies, it struggles sometimes to get those kills. I'd also say just the way its Mysterium works, getting kills powers up its Decay Blast and its Super Decay Blast. Since you're not getting as many trash mob kills, because the mobs are generally stronger, it means that you're not activating the Mysterium on this weapon as often as you would like a lot of the time. If there's a bunch of elites in front of you, or creepers in Velmorn, it can be hard to get 6 kills before using its blast, or even 3 kills. And then when you do so, it drains a lot of your stamina. So this weapon can feel really oppressively powerful when you're doing like mid-level content. So if you're doing Scarlet Coast, you can do it really fast with this weapon because you basically one burst all the trash mobs, and then every few seconds you do a giant decay blast and wipe everything else. It can feel kind of like Cricket in that way, where you're just dominating like 3 nodes of enemies at once. But when you start hitting really tanky enemies that prevent you from activating its Mysterium, the gun falls off. Its Mysterium doesn't work against bosses. This is sort of a running theme. And not every gun needs to work against bosses, but for a gun to really carry you against the hardest content, it does need to. So this weapon is very solid. It has such cool mechanics and theming. It has a lot of uses, but against some of this really hard content, it can struggle in a way a lot of the middle damage guns struggle, against just the raw HP pools of these big enemies. So for that reason, I'm going to put it over here in B tier. Midas. So Midas Midas is a gun that has had a lot of bugs associated with it that was making it better than it was supposed to be. I think this weapon is really hard to use effectively. It's just its Mysteriums are difficult to use. It's not that it's a bad weapon. I think the ammo economy on it is good. I think its mechanics just feel clunky to use. Getting the fast reload, keeping it in the fire effect, keeping it in the higher damage level. You kind of want to get high heat and then drop to low heat, and it just feels very finicky, and the reward is so small. Like the reward is lighting an enemy on fire. When you drop Burning Stake, you light every enemy on the screen on fire. So why are you like dealing with this like heat level and shooting shots into the air, or like at just to get to that heat level. It just feels like so much work for the reward of doing like pretty middle tier damage. I think this weapon could be improved. I think it might get a rework of some kind. It just feels clunky and it feels like a gun made for like combat that isn't really relevant at the highest levels of Witchfire with all these strong enemies and bosses. And I think it has a worse ammo economy than other weapons of its type. So for that reason, I'm sorry, Midas, you're going in the D tier. Sorry if Midas is your favorite weapon. It's cool. I think it's a cool mechanic, but I think it maybe needed to be tweaked somehow. Okay, Nemesis. This was the gun I was most excited for with the new update because I just love a little lever action rifle. I use them in every game. I use them in Helldivers, even though they're only mediocre. I just love lever action rifles. I love getting headshots, basically. So when this gun came out, it was, I would say, quite weak. The main issues it had were the like marking mechanic was so slow and it went so far away. You would like shoot an enemy and the mark would disappear. It would go underground, it would go across the map. That was a bug. It was also just slow. Like even if it was going to something in your field of vision, it was so slow to get there. It would take forever. So this gun basically ended up being like a weapon with no Mysteriums attached to it, which is usually bad. I will say this gun with no Mysteriums might be the best gun with no Mysteriums. It just has great stats. Like it does a ton of damage and the reload is, slower than other weapons, but you can sort of fit it in between going in and out of cover. Now though, this weapon is a beast. I think it's kind of underrated from the community because it had so many issues when it came out. And I think people had a high expectations for it. I think now it's really solid. And the self-marking mechanic with the fire and the explosion and the extra damage, it can get some wild numbers. And the fact that it kind of stacks with these like burning enemies count as crits and all the burning synergies and stuff. I think fire is the strongest element in the game, like by far right now, because of those synergies. This weapon is way better than it was. The only time it really struggles is when you have a lot of stronger enemies coming at you. When you run out of bullets, you feel really bad. You need to run away and go reload for a while. Even with I have a very high arsenal level, my reload time is pretty good. You just need to get a ton of bullets in the weapon. It gets a lot better if you have reloading Arcana, but it's sometimes hard to guarantee them. They're not the strongest, compared to other like just straight damage upgrades. This weapon is way better than it used to be, and I really recommend you give it a try. You can destroy bosses almost as fast as Hunger with this. It's just the reload is, Hunger reloads 6 bullets at once. This, you reload them one at a time. It's the only thing holding it back, really. And also, the RNG sort of mechanic can really mess you up sometimes. Sometimes you're shooting something in the head over and over, and man, you're just not getting a mark, or you're not getting a mark on a target you can see. It can be annoying, but just base. It's strong. Give it a try if you dropped it when you first picked it up. It's awesome now. I'm going to put it in A tier. Oracle. This is one of the new weapons from WEBGRAVE. It is great. So here's what I love about Oracle. I am a little scaredy cat, and sometimes I like to hide around corners and kill all the enemies while they can't see me. And it's pretty good at that. Ironically, it seems much easier to shoot enemies that can see you because they kind of run straight at you in a line. So some of that sort of shooting people from behind walls fantasy doesn't work with that, but it does so much damage. This weapon does an obscene amount of single target damage. Just shooting them through walls, getting the third Mysterium like charge up mechanic going. This thing is it's basically Hypnosis, but you can shoot through walls. Of course, The downside is Hypnosis has like 100 rounds. This weapon has like 30. So ammo economy is a huge issue on this weapon. You can't use it for smaller mobs, or you shouldn't. You'll just run out of ammo. Even if you're running a lot of the ammo reclaim stuff, like rosary beads, it will run out of ammo. That and just like the slow fire rate are the only things holding it back from just completely dominating. However, just the power of shooting things, it has such a huge range. Shooting things from so far away when they can't fight back, even in crowded streets like Velmorn, you can just shoot them through the wall. This thing is a monster. It's what Hailstorm wants to be. So it's great. But of course, this tier list is for the hardest content, and that includes bosses. This weapon is not good against bosses. It has big ammo problems. So as much as I'm gushing about it, I love the weapon, folks. But as much as I'm gushing about it, it can't be that high on this tier list. I can't do it. It wouldn't be honest of me. This weapon has to go down, I would say, in the top of C tier. I think the reason B tier is higher is because these are better against bosses than it. It really struggles against bosses, and if it's a weapon that's bad against bosses, it can't be high in this tier list. So that's where it is. But it's a great weapon, and if you haven't found it, find it. It's awesome, and try it out. Really cool. Psychopomp. This weapon got some changes, but overall it's pretty much the same weapon. This is a weapon that's sort of has the opposite problem of a lot of these weapons, which is that it's basically only good at killing either just bosses because of the stacking damage, or a bunch of little guys where you kill an enemy, get your melee back, melee an enemy, reload the weapon with the melee. That's how its Mysterium sort of works, like this melee dashing thing. Issue with that is there's so many issues with that. First of all, getting up in people's faces, not as good as anymore, as I've said before. Melee does not do enough damage to hurt some of these elite enemies. It'll like scratch them, and now you're just up in their face. And then a whole mag from the Psychopomp might not even kill them. And then you're in a really bad position. It has no range. Like the Judgement is a shotgun, it has some range. This thing, you actually need to be sticking the gun inside the enemy's face for it to do damage. I think this gun, I think people do underestimate this gun because it's sort of memey to jump around and bash guys with your melee or whatever. But it does do absurd stacking damage to a single target, and it has a pretty fast reload. You can make builds where this thing totally deletes bosses. It's just like, the main thing is, why are you not using the Echo? Like, the Echo works so much better than this gun. It just does more damage. It has fire built into it. If you want to delete a boss like that, slide around with the Echo. Get some of the slide arcana going. It'll be insane. Psychopomp has some benefits from Arcana, but if you want to kill bosses, use Echo. If you want to kill elites, use Echo. Basically, its competition is too good, which is Echo. They serve a very similar niche, but Echo just does way more damage. So Psychopomp, I'm sorry to say, this weapon just struggles. It has big ammo issues too. It really has a lot of troubles. I think it's around, I think Midas is honestly the top of D tier. I think it's probably a little worse than Midas. You could argue because it can wipe out bosses with certain setups like that, it's good, but the rest of the level is so hard when you're using this weapon. Like, this makes the game harder until you get to the boss, and then you have less resources for the boss. And yeah, maybe you one-shot the boss with just infinitely stacking, you get all your bullets back in your magazine Psychopomp thing, but that's not that easy to set up. There are so many better ways to do that. It's just outclassed right now. I think melee might, with like the addition of melee weapons, it might get better because it can like synergize with them. But devs are probably gonna wait to do that until that occurs. So this weapon is struggling right now. Ricochet, one of the first weapons I ever used. This weapon is another weapon that might need a rework. It is so clunky to use. Man, when you get like the triple lock on targets and like there's lightning flying everywhere and just a ton of stun damage, like it can feel strong, but it becomes so clunky. Like if there's two enemies that are linked and then you kill the big one is linked in there and you kill the two smaller enemies and it's like, okay, I need to reload. It just feels really hard to get value out of because like it's hard to choose your targets, right? You would want to link like three things that are roughly the same health together, like three big guys, or three little guys and wipe them quickly, but it's really hard to do that in a fight. And also, since the range isn't that good, like you really have to get in there and it becomes very hectic. Basically, everyone who uses this weapon just sort of like zooms in and like sweeps their screen with the scope. And then you can't really pick what you get when you do that. So this weapon just feels clunky and it has low damage and has mediocre ammo economy. I think it's one of the worst weapons in the game. It really struggles. So it's not that good at its job. Like there are other weapons that clear enemies faster. Like use the cricket. If you want to kill a bunch of trash mobs with your gun, try out the cricket. You just like dash, stun, instant kill, and then build stacking damage into the high heavens, and you get super Witchfire back and you're throwing spells. It's like this weapon on speed. It's so good. It's not good against bosses. The mechanic doesn't even work against bosses. You could argue that it's worse than All-Seeing Eye. I think this weapon has a lot of troubles. Okay. Rotweaver. Rotweaver, it has a big magazine. It shoots so fast. It's probably the best weapon in the game for hitting soul sigils, so it has some utility against big enemies. I think the main issue with Rotweaver is that Rot used to be very hard to get, but now there's a lot of ways to get it. So it had like its special niche of like, oh, you need Rot in your build, you put Rotweaver in there. But now there's like Parasite, there's Judgement, there's Koschei, there's a bunch of ways to get Rot, so it's lost its niche. And if you want to have like a machine pistol or something that shoots really, really fast to pop soul sigils, just use Cricket. It does so much damage, you never need to reload it. It's sort of like the benefit of the fast firing weapon is you can pop the soul sigils. But when you pop soul sigils with this weapon and the enemy is stunned, your damage is so low, it almost doesn't even matter. And like, yes, the Mysterium support like a play style of like kind of spraying all the enemies and then backing off a little bit. It's just Rot. The Arcana synergies around Rot are really more about debuffing and buffing yourself. They're kind of supporty. So it's really hard to make this like Omega Rot build that kills everything. It doesn't really exist right now in the game. It might in the future. But right now, like shooting everything and dealing a little bit of damage over time is just like a weak way to play. It takes so long to kill the big enemies with that play style that like why do that versus some of the other great synergies. Great at popping soul sigils, love the fire rate. I think the mechanics are pretty cool, spreading Rot all over the place. Against smaller enemies and get really out of hand and like everything's rotting and everything's going away. But there's so many weapons that deal with small enemies well, and mostly spells. Like imagine using the Hangfire against a bunch of small enemies. You shoot each one once and they all explode. It's very good. So Rotweaver, I think, lost its niche. Its playstyle isn't supported by Arcana currently. and it just is bad against bosses. Okay, Rotweaver. Unfortunately, I think it's better. This is I think it's better than Hailstorm. But it doesn't have the boss killing potential of Psychopomp, so it's got to go down there. Oh man, I'm gonna get so much hate for this tier list because I've moved a lot of things down that were higher. But I think this is where it is right now, and I'll talk about that a little at the end. Striga, my lovely, got a pretty substantial nerf. Basically, they reduced its single target damage. Boy, it kind of needed it. So I was more in favor of reducing its ammo capacity. It has so much ammo. It's crazy. Like reducing its ammo capacity, maybe even reducing its mag size to like 5 or something. Instead, they reduced its single target damage, which I think is fair. This weapon was basically a demonic weapon. There were many times I was like, oh, I could use my demonic weapon, or I could just shoot Striga from halfway across the map. And like it has such a giant hitbox, just hits everything in the head, and it explodes with fire and lightning. You get 2 elements on a weapon that's good at multiple ranges with massive ammo economy. It needed the nerf. It's still amazing. I think, there are some people will say, like, hey, the single target stuff really did get nerfed on it. And that makes it worse against bosses, and it makes it worse against elite enemies. This thing is still crazy. The fact that you get double elements, on a weapon that has insane ammo capacity and range, and it's like so easy to get headshots with this thing. You just sort of like blast in your enemy's head, and you hit them, and they all explode. It has AoE, it has single target, it has multiple elements, it has great ammo capacity. It's good against bosses. It has great stun damage if you've got like stun bullets going on. This thing's crazy. It's still great. It can go through a lot of nerfs and still be great. Is it better than Hunger? I don't know. Maybe. I think for 90% of your playthrough, it'll be better than Hunger. Like, Hunger is great when you have all the Arcana unlocked and you're fighting the boss. It's better than the Striga. But for the rest of the time, when you don't have all the Arcana unlocked, when you're fighting groups of elites and stuff, the Striga is way better at multiple ranges. Have to put it in S tier. The King lives on. Is it first in S tier? Is it not? That's up to you. But it's so good. Keep using it. It's awesome. Use these two together. Hunger plus Striga, you have unbelievable single target and AoE capabilities that both stack with similar Arcana. It's nuts. It's crazy. And you're good at like all ranges. These weapons are nuts. Okay, so that's it for the tier list. This is upgraded. This is updated for WEBGRAVE. I'm sure some of you will disagree. And I've put a lot of weapons in the D tier. I've moved weapons down from where they were, and I put some of them up. I think overall impressions is this sort of mid-range playstyle. Striga and Hunger got a lot better because Velmorn is mostly mid-range, and a lot of enemies get in your face, so you need close range options. But shotguns also got worse because it's hard for you to go in. And like face tank, you can't really do that anymore, or not as well as you did before. I think there were a lot of big change-ups, not even with nerfs and buffs, but with the way the game has changed since the WEBGRAVE update. And overall, I really just love all the weapons in this game. There's so much fun. More fun with these weapons than I have with like games that really focus on their shooting, like Doom and other things like that. The fact that there's so many of them and they keep being so unique is just like a joy. And I hope the developers keep making weapons. I love all their ideas. Some of these weapons probably should get a rework, or maybe just their numbers tweaked, like Rotweaver with just some rot like Arcana that are better would suddenly become an incredible weapon. So I'm excited to see where that goes. I hope you enjoyed. And hey, like and subscribe. Why not? And I'll see you for future tier lists and more Witchfire content in the future. Thanks.